The Minnesota Vikings are set to be one of the most interesting teams this season at the NFL trade deadline. We're going to be talking about some moves that they are likely going to make, as well as what Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, Team GM, has said about this deadline and what the Minnesota Vikings plans are. And there's a lot of interesting stuff to take away from this that the Vikings are going to be looking at in this deadline. We're going to be talking about all of this here in this video. Before we get into it, however, we know that 91% of you guys watching right now are not subscribed to the channel. If you're looking for a spot to get all of your Minnesota Vikings news, you're in the right spot. Hit the sub button. Join us here on the channel as we cover everything Minnesota Vikings. Without any further ado, let's get into our first topic here, which is the overlook and what Kwesi has said about this deadline. And there's been many discussions coming out of this after the Vikings have lost their last two games to the Lions and to the Rams, and what this team's outlook for the rest of the season will be. And we know that, especially with the injury to Christian Darrisaw, this is not a good outcome for the Minnesota Vikings, and a move will likely have to be made in response to this. Now, we've seen Kwesi said that this team is going to be very strong at this deadline. They're going to be looking at every single scenario, every single path of what they can do to make this team better, and looking at what is around the NFL, who we can see traded, who will fit into any type of roster. The Vikings have a great opportunity to definitely add a few big names and especially make this team better for not just this season, but years to come. And we're going to be pulling up our first screenshot here, discussing what we're going to see. And that's not saying the Vikings won't consider acquiring a rental player when looking for better players over the upcoming few seasons and those impending free agents via trade, perhaps as a stopgap for Darrisaw left tackle, but it does seem like GM Kwesi Adofo-Mensah's ideal move will be to land someone who can help now and for years to come. So what we're looking at here is similar to something that we've seen with the TJ Hockenson style of trade. We got him a very kind of out of nowhere trade. Getting him, that certainly helped this season and has certainly helped the tight ends for the Vikings for many years now, since he's pretty much joined the Vikings. And that's the kind of trade that we're looking at right now from Kwesi, what he's trying to do, what he's trying to pull out of his hat, and this is exactly what the Vikings need. Me and Griffin have said this since the beginning of the season, since we were off to this hot start, that the Vikings should not go full LA Rams. They should not go full all in. This was not supposed to be a good year for the Vikings, but they have shocked everybody. And, obviously we're not complaining about this, but it's not the time for the Vikings to buy in completely. They still need to buy in, certainly, because this team is still getting better and better with Sam Darnold at the helm, with JJ McCarthy getting ready for next season. They want to be better and better throughout the years, and this would be certainly a great start to this by adding a few players here and there. Not saying that a lot of these won't be rentals from players on one-year deals or in the last year of their deal, but a lot of the players that Kwesi is looking for are players that could certainly help for years to come. And moving on to the next screenshot here, this is what we have, another one going at this. If the Vikings make a big move at the deadline, they could be included to focus on players who gave them what Hockenson did in 2022, immediate help with long-term flexibility, and that's what Ben Gosling wrote. For example, Browns cornerback Greg Newsome II is just 24 with a fifth-year option for 2025. He wouldn't come cheap, but a young corner who'd fit in the Vikings scheme might be worth dealing a 2025 first-round pick, especially if the choice could be late in the first round. And that's what kind of we're looking at right now, that this first-round pick is something that Kwesi is interested in moving. The team right now is already 5-2, which obviously the 5-0 start was better, but right now we're in line for a very low first-round pick. And if that's the case, I would not personally mind, and I'm sure Kwesi and the Vikings would not mind moving this individually. I think that's a great option for what we're seeing, especially if there's not really many players that the Vikings will be interested in the bottom of the draft, and especially if you can get a corner, a solid corner who's made a name for himself already, only at the age of 24, in Greg Newsome II, and having him for multiple years to come, that would really help out the Vikings corner slot a lot. That would be a very big fix, rather than having to go out and try and draft multiple corners as we've done in the past with Rick Spielman and never really working out in any sense of the imagination. So a deal like this is something that I would certainly like to see entertained by Kwesi, something that would come out of this as a big win for years to come rather than just this season. However, there are multiple moves that the Vikings this season could make to help out right now. We want to see, if we do end up trading this first-round pick, we don't want to see the team go right down to the bottom and really start off in a really bad way. So there are certain players that I would not really mind going out and getting on this one-year deal to make sure that this team is good for this season. The first-round pick is definitely a piece to be traded, but nothing that is going to be overvalued once it does come down to the draft. And that's when we kind of come into a pretty interesting one right now. And as a top trade target, as reported by Alec Lewis, and it's not the position we would think, a defensive tackle from the Miami Dolphins, and Calais Campbell. A very interesting one, especially how old he is at 38 years old. He's not a guy you'd normally think of coming out of this and being a trade target for the Minnesota Vikings, especially at the beginning of the season when we were expecting this team to kind of be around the middle to lower part of the pack. But looking at this, not only, but you saw that hint above that Calais Campbell's productivity this season. I mean, this dude has an 84.8 PFF grade, 194 snaps, which is good for a fifth among all defensive linemen. He's also top 10 in PFF and pass rush grade at 78.4 and run defense grade in 75.3. So even at 38 years old, Calais Campbell is still a force to be reckoned with. And Alec Lewis coming out and discussing this as one of his top targets is definitely something that needs to be entertained by the Vikings. Now, he's on the final year of his deal, as he did sign a 1 year with the Miami Dolphins at 38 years old. Likely could see 1 or 2 more seasons, but his career is not going to be much longer in the NFL. And in the sense of the Vikings where they are now, they could use that defensive tackle just to kind of solidify this defense after some people and some teams may seem to be figuring out Brian Flores' defensive scheme. And adding Calais Campbell, who, interestingly, is above Dexter Lawrence in stats this season, could be an absolutely insane move. We've discussed this Dexter Lawrence, that he's an option for the Vikings, however, would be quite a bit more expensive than Calais Campbell. And what we're looking at with that is a pretty interesting way to kind of add to this team at a much cheaper price, shorter term, but this season in specific, and not counting out Dexter Lawrence for future seasons. But looking at what Alec Lewis had to say here, maybe the most enticing name out there is Calais Campbell, the ageless wonder who's at 38, has a higher pressure rate than Dexter Lawrence II. Adding the former All-Pro to the defense, already full of them in Harrison Smith and Stephon Gilmore, would generate a different level of fear in offenses. Because he's only under a 1-year contract, the Vikings might not have to part with a premium pick either. And I think that's the big thing here, that Kwesi wants to save these premium picks for players who will help in the future. But if you can get rentals at a very cheap price, whether that is a low pick, whether that's a secondary player or a prospect who the Vikings may not try and work with in the future, things like this could be certainly great additions for Kwesi here in this season at this deadline, and also giving the opportunity to save those big pieces for some big players, i.e. Greg Newsome. And I think that's a great option that we will discuss in another video. But right now, I do very, very much like the idea of Calais Campbell. Even though at 38, as I mentioned, the pressure rate is great. The defense is still very, very good. He's a very, very big defensive lineman, and I think that's what the Vikings need to just continue to add to an already stacked Brian Flores defense. As you can see, 6'8", 307. Guy is a unit. With the 17 years of experience, that will help out this very young team once again, whether that is on the offense or defense side of the ball. He's been around the game long enough to be able to help these younger guys, even Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, Jalen Naylor, all of these young guys on the offense, as well as the young guys on the defense. Having a guy like this around the locker room who's been in the game for nearly 2 decades, it's just going to be another piece that can kind of bring this locker room closer together and show the younger guys what the NFL truly is on the player side of things. And I think that Calais Campbell is definitely a thing that Kwesi should certainly think about. The 1-year addition may not help for the future, but this season, especially giving them a lower first-round pick, but still being a first-round pick, the name value of that is still one that teams are going to want. And having that availability for maybe Greg Newsome, maybe some other guys who will help out longer term, TJ Hockenson style, I think there's no wrong answer to this. So let me know what you think about Calais Campbell in the comments below, and what do you think about some other moves and the sense that Kwesi is going for some more future help as well as this season. I think it's a pretty interesting one that we're going to be talking about a lot more until the trade deadline comes. But that's all I got in this video. Did enjoy, give it a like, and if you're still here in this video, make sure to hit the sub button. You get all your Vikings news just like this. But that's all I got. Thank you for watching. Hope you have a great day. See you later.